The presenting sponsor of OnEducation is Participate. Lately, teachers from all over have been working together to find new approaches to provide quality remote education. Participate's sister company, Participate Learning, presents United We Teach, a global gathering place for educators to share distance learning resources as we navigate these strange times. For these resources and more, visit participate.com/oneducation.
Teachers will administer coronavirus tests, and the internet exploded. Welcome to OnEducation, part of the On Podcast Media Network. My name is Mike Washburn.
And I'm Glen Irvin. Friends, we have an awesome pod for you today. We will discuss the importance of transparency with educational influencers, whether school reopening plans will fail, and our guest this week is innovative educator and CEO of Ready Learner One, Micah Shippee.
It's funny, we took a week off. We had a guest lined up, and it didn't work out with scheduling, and that happens. But it's the middle of the summer, and it's nice to have a week off, anyways.
For sure.
But it's funny, we were just talking off air about trying to remember all of the things that happened, all of the nonsense, trying to remember all the nonsense that went on this week, so that we can come back and tell you about all of the nonsense, because that is our target. That is our target market is talking about the nonsense.
Yes.
So
yes, and it's just going to get crazier each week. There's going to be just more and more buildup of things as more schools start reopening. It's going to be intense. So we're going to have to cover it week by week.
Yeah. I should say that we really do appreciate all of the listens, all of the downloads, all of the mentions. We were also just talking off air about how popular the podcast is, especially over the summer and during COVID. You are sticking with us and sharing the episodes, and we really love that you do that. I encourage you to go to Apple Podcasts or whatever and drop a review there. It always helps. Share episodes on Twitter, on social media. That's super helpful as well. And we think we're working hard for stuff, and it's more than just Glenn and I. We have a team, and we're all kind of working together and we have this great Twitter DM group where we have really good conversations where, the ideas for the podcast get framed for the week, with the folks there. And, we just want to thank everybody for listening, and sharing this space with us and being part of a community. We do have some interesting ideas for the fall. We're going to bring back OnEducation Live, because that was actually pretty popular when it was on. It was we did a little bit of a test there in the spring, and I think that it's something we should definitely do as we come back. Our Twitch show on the Participate Twitch channel. So lots going on. I don't know what you've been up to, Glenn. I know you're getting ready to go back to school probably in a couple weeks, if not now. No, when?
No, it's after Labor Day.
Couple weeks still.
So no, it's after Labor Day. So we're waiting. We just received the
Let's not push it, right?
Department of Education and the governor's notice of what we're going to actually do, and it was interesting. I mean, it was definitely not a declaration of what everybody's going to do. Instead, it was you need to figure out what the numbers are within your specific county. And the counties, maybe there's multiple counties that your district resides in, and use that information to start a conversation, basically, of what level you should actually start off at, whether it should be just completely virtual or whether you should have a combination of different things. And I really love that, but it also puts a lot of pressure, obviously, on superintendents and administrators at a local level. And then, as I've seen, even in Minnesota, there's a lot of politics that then get involved with school boards, possibly overriding the decisions that superintendents make, basically for the safety of kids. So that's going to be interesting to see how all of that plays out. And that's currently happening in one of our largest school districts in St. Paul. So I love that the governor put it back out with all of the information and support. Basically, they said, we'll support every single one of your decisions. We'll make sure that everybody's going to be safe. If you're going to do it this way, you're going to reopen. But we're not going to force you to do X, Y, or Z because it doesn't make sense. Even within Minnesota, there's such a vast difference of what the infection rates look like.
A lot of these Midwestern states are super complicated, right? Because there's like, and Minnesota actually might be the most complicated of all of them in that there's a couple like really large cities.
Yes.
Right. And then a huge amount of rural spaces.
Rural areas. Yes.
Like Minnesota's pretty complicated because of the difference between, these rural spaces and, Minneapolis, which was also the epicenter, or at least the beginning epicenter of the protests and stuff like that.
Yes.
With George Floyd. I mean, so you have, a lot of diversity in terms of the situations that are happening in different places. Yep. I can't imagine any like one size fits all policy would work in a place like Minnesota, frankly, at all.
Yeah. And too many of these states' governors have made those types of big decisions.
Yeah.
And said, yes, we're all reopening, et cetera, whatever it might be. And we'll get to those articles in a little bit as far as what's happened already in certain states. And it doesn't make any sense if you're not using the data that's, number one, currently available to you. So within the last few weeks, to then make those decisions locally, or at least have those conversations. You don't, basically on the thing, there's a grid where it says if you have this many infections per 10,000, it's a factor there. And then it grades them and says, okay, you can fully reopen, you can do these things, but we want you to know that this grid is just a starting point of a conversation. We're not telling you have to do this, but it's it's a good place to start the conversation. So really, it's crazy. My wife is already looking at me like going like, why are you attending all of these meetings? Why are you doing all this stuff during the summer? Because I usually don't do a ton of work as far as the summer. We're already doing all of our planning, professional development, doing a ton of work in the summer because we know there's a lot of work to do no matter which plan we decide to implement this fall. So, and I know a lot of other people are in the same category, a lot of educators.
Our 300 to 500 Canadian active regular listeners would be a little pissed at me if I didn't mention that the Ontario plan has also been released since we last spoke. And unlike what you just said, Ontario did basically mandate for the entire province. And, I don't think Ontario is as... the disparity isn't as strong in Ontario as in Minnesota, but there are definitely like parts of northern Ontario that are very much, out there in terms of, being not heavily populated at all. But, 90% of the population of Ontario is within, that, on the shore of Lake Ontario. So that's where most of the people are. And then an hour north, which is where we are. So mandatory face masks for all students in grade 4 and up.
Interesting.
Any student in grade 3 to 1 in kindergarten, not mandatory face masks.
Interesting.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. What did your wife think of that?
Yeah, they definitely like go. So the Ford government is definitely. I don't want to explicitly say they're throwing like the medical community under the bus, but they're definitely saying, hey, this isn't our plan. This is the medical advisor's plan, right? Because the medical advisors are falling back on this whole, kids can't spread it. Little kids don't spread it as much. We know that's not necessarily true. And certainly articles and a lot of information has come out in the last week or so that kind of show that little kids are are super spreaders, in fact, in some cases. So this whole and that's obviously scary for us personally because my wife's a kindergarten teacher.
Yes.
And our son Jacob would have been scheduled to be in kindergarten this year. So we have so any student is allowed to opt out of going to school in person.
They can choose distance learning.
Parents are allowed to say we're going to keep our kids home.
Same plan here. Yep.
They will be given an online teacher, so it will not be necessarily their school teacher. It may not even necessarily be attached to that teacher. May not necessarily even be attached to the school that they would have normally went to. Yeah. There will probably be a pool of online teachers that then get assigned a certain amount of kids, so you can opt out. What else? So the biggest thing, though, the scariest thing is, and this goes back to a pretty strong fight that was happening during, the strikes and all of that stuff back last year, is that the Ford government is not reducing class size.
Ooh.
So, even so they're basing a lot of their rules and guidelines from the Hospital for Sick Children, which is kind of the major kids hospital institution in Canada.
Okay.
It's based in Toronto. And they've said, it's funny because in their plan, in their guidelines, they say that any back to school plan has to be accompanied by reduced class size of about 15 kids, which seems reasonable. But they're not reducing the class size at all. So the class size will be potentially 30 kindergarten kids in a class without masks.
Dude, that seems insane. I mean, it seems
Sounds
insane
great.
in the United States, especially. Your caseload, you guys' cases in Ontario are way less,
significantly lower
than probably any state, I would imagine, in the United States. I'm
100%.
not sure what the numbers are, but because of that, then I can see that is actually happening. There's a mandatory law here in Minnesota that anybody indoors has to wear a mask. Yeah. So that includes schools. So that includes all of our students, K through 12. So that's going to be an interesting component because we're having our kids have to do that. Interesting enough, though, that third grade and below, you're saying.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I believe that Ontario has less active cases of COVID than Florida had deaths yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, so very few. So you're just kind of like a North Dakota type of thing. I know North Dakota, South Dakota, North Dakota for sure, but I'm not sure about South. Have very, very few cases, because of very rural state, not very big population. You guys have a huge population, very little cases. So
much of the COVID right now in Ontario is concentrated in 2 or 3 places. Toronto, like the downtown core of Toronto, which makes sense, the most populated space. Windsor, which is by Detroit, and Ottawa, I believe. Now, the one in Windsor is the most explainable. They get a lot of migrant workers, and there was an outbreak amongst migrant workers in the Windsor area that come up every summer to harvest and stuff like that. And then they go back home. And there was a big outbreak in Windsor area related to that. I'll tell you, in Simcoe County, which is where I live, an hour north of Barrie, there are maybe 1 or 2 cases reported a day, if that. There are many days where there are none. And so so Cheryl works in Peel District School Board, which is kind of a little bit further north of Toronto, but still pretty heavily populated. Peel is anyways, but she lives even north in the northern part of that school district, which is giant. Peel School Board is the second biggest school board in Canada. It's huge. And so, we're working through a lot of things in our head. about, there's complexity related to Jacob going back to school.
Yeah.
There's complexity related to Isaac going back to school. Isaac didn't do necessarily super well with the distance learning and maintaining a really strong schedule and like that self-discipline that I think some kids need, especially when their parents can't be like on them constantly. Like Cheryl was teaching, I was working, we were busy as hell, to be honest. And it was tough. It was really hard to make sure that Isaac was constantly doing his work, even though the amount of work was pretty minimal. And then obviously we also have to talk about, how Cheryl's going to do. And I'll tell you, I mean, I can't say enough about my wife and how hard she worked during COVID to be a really good teacher, and to learn, how to do a whole bunch of things. And then, to be honest, she spent a lot of her time teaching other teachers in her school, how to do this stuff and do it well. And so I have a ton of confidence that Cheryl is going to figure out how to manage this, but it doesn't mean that we're not scared.
Yeah. I was just thinking about the exposure. Are the adults going to be wearing masks?
I believe that all teachers have to wear masks.
Okay. That's what I was
all
wondering.
the time.
Okay. That makes sense.
There are tons of questions, not a lot of answers, related to things like occasional teachers, like supply teachers. What do you call them? Substitute teachers.
Substitutes. Yep.
And not a lot of answers related to things like librarians, and administrators who so if a class gets an outbreak, what happens with like the other teachers that class has seen that aren't part of like that specific class. So it's like the administrators that go from class to class, or the what we call them the planning time teachers, the teachers that teach while their regular classroom teacher has
the FIAD,
like a break,
the music,
right?
The art teachers, exactly.
Art teachers, for sure. That sees like a bunch of classes. So
imagine
there's not
how
a lot
many
of
students
answers
they're exposed to. Also, those teachers that are, extra. I wouldn't call them the extra. The other things that aren't taught in the regular classroom. So music and art and FIAD, and everything else that may be offered at schools, where they see like you. I was trying to think of you. You probably had a similar kind of rotating schedule where you had hundreds and hundreds of kids that you saw on a daily basis or exposed
over
to.
400. Yeah.
Exposed
a week.
To
over 400 kids in a week. I would
exactly
have seen.
where you're circulating that kind of thing. It's like, those are the people. My God, they basically see everybody, or a huge section of the students in a school. So
we're going to want to talk to some of our librarian friends when September rolls around. We'll get Jennifer Casa-Todd back on the podcast. Maybe actually someone we haven't talked to before, Jen Giffen, is a librarian, teacher librarian in York School Board, which is Newmarket, which is a fairly populated space just south of me, between Toronto and me. And she hasn't been on the pod, but she'd be great to talk to as well.
For sure.
About that experience of seeing a whole bunch of kids during this time. It'll be interesting. So, we were saying we were off for a couple weeks, and that gives us a lot of time to pile up all of the Twitter nonsense that we see. And there was or maybe not nonsense, but definitely hot topics. There's always something to talk about on Twitter. And I'll tell you, the two that came across us the strongest this week, what the hell is ISTE doing? Charging
let's talk about ISTE.
$115 US for the honor.
That's the early bird price, Mike.
For the honor of hopping on a Zoom call.
So a presenter that's going to present that had a presentation obviously accepted at ISTE, and they can change those up.
I have one too. Steve and I are scheduled to present it. Yeah, 100%.
So you have these presentations. You're being accepted. You had to. If anyone's never gone through the process of actually putting together a proposal for ISTE, just understand it's very rigorous. It's rigorous. A lot of people just give up in it, like me. I've given up many times on several ones where I was like, "What am I doing? Why am I doing this?" Anyway, it's very thorough. Let's just call it that. And then not very many people are accepted. So you get accepted. And then we just saw this post, and it was by Jake, right? Jake Miller.
Yeah, Jake Miller.
And several other people have posted this exact same thing where if you register early as a presenter, you can get it for $115 so that you can present your content to this audience virtually. You're not even in Anaheim or any of these other wonderful places. You are presenting from your basement like we are now, and you get to first pay up $115 just for the honor. It just seems sick. It's disgusting.
I sit at this desk all day. I'm not paying $115 just to keep doing it. And I'll tell you, I have a lot of ways to get an audience these days. I don't need exposure.
This is
or
crazy.
whatever the heck you can use to justify presenting at ISTE. I don't need that anymore either necessarily. So
yeah, it seems ridiculous.
We always thought that charging presenters to come to conferences was ridiculous to begin with.
I hate that. Yes.
And so the idea of charging presenters to charging them to go on a Zoom call for them, pay us to work for us
it doesn't make any sense.
Beyond stupid.
Beyond I don't stupid. Get it. Yes, I don't get it at all.
It is the height of ignorance. That I'll tell you, the cognitive dissonance of ISTE talking about supporting teachers and then doing something like this is just, it makes my head explode. So
it doesn't make any sense.
I'll tell you, if I am doing this, so I've already communicated to the people that I need to communicate to that I am not paying $115 out of my own pocket to do this. If you want me to do this, feel free to pay.
You need to pay,
and I'm happy to, because I was doing a session on behalf of someone.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And so they can pay, but I don't need the joy. It's not a joy and honor. It's work, and it's hard work in a lot of cases, and I can find ways to reach the people that I want to reach with that similar message, and frankly, I am reaching the educators that I think I want to reach with the similar message.
I was just thinking about that with the platform that even just Twitter provides, and many people just sharing all of their resources, putting together YouTube videos, etc.
I'm on Twitch every day at 9 a.m., friends. I'm on Twitch.
Much less someone like you where you actually have a platform to be able to do that. But I'm just thinking about like some of these people that present at many conferences. How could you say, or even just if this was your first ISTE and you got a presentation accepted, that's a huge freaking deal. So you want to present.
I get it.
But to pay $150 to charge someone to do that, it just seems so wrong. I don't get it, and I understand that at big conferences, like there's one of the things that they have to do is justify the venue, all of the extra costs, all of this kind of stuff.
It's expensive.
But on this, in a virtual setting, I don't know how you can justify those expenses. I'm sorry. There's ways to do this, and we know of many, many ways, as we've, you specifically know of many ways to be able to host conferences with large numbers of people and be able to pay for premium accounts of, let's say, Zoom or whatever it might be. And it's not that much money, not to be charging then your presenters to. So that's why I said it just doesn't make any sense financially, whatever it might be, and especially doesn't make sense in this time period, what we're going through right now. You still want to have the conference? Great. Make it free for the presenters minimum and super cheap for anybody attending. I mean, the prices were still there for, if you want to attend people, if you're a member of ISTE, $145. It's like, what? I don't get it. I'm not going to be paying the $145.
Right.
Or actually, I'm not a member of ISTE, so I would actually be paying $155 if I pay by October 1st. No thanks. It's not worth it to me. There's so much value right now of so many valuable things that are happening out there that are free. For example, your daily PD sessions that you guys are doing on Twitch for free. It's not like someone has to pay to do that, to go attend. You're learning tons from super professional educators that are doing stuff right now, highly innovative things in their classroom. And you can ask them questions anytime. You know, it's like, you want to talk to Steve Isaacs about what he does? Good, jump on there. You want to talk to Mike about all kinds of what ideas you're running through your head? You know?
9 a.m.
I never understand it, man.
Twitch.tv/inside participate. We will not charge you $115.
Oh my God.
I mean,
so that was one of the
friends.
That was one of the things. And then
it's clearly a money theme.
Yes, it's a money theme, because the next one
for the pod
was super frustrating me, and you wrote an actual post about it. I just was doing DMs because I was just ranting in the DM chat. But basically, what I can't currently stand right now, and you actually put it in eloquent words as far as, putting it out there as far as in a tweet, is people that are considered educational influencers. So people that have thousands and thousands and thousands of followers.
Some of them are friends.
Yeah. To suddenly make some kind of declarations about a specific company, product, whatever it might be, but don't ever say that, yes, you are actually getting paid to do that. So several times now, this started happening a while back. You know who I'm talking about? That about 4 to 6 weeks ago, I showed you a post by somebody who said something to the effect of, Google Slides are so passé. Now I'm moving on to Microsoft PowerPoint, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's so gross. It's like it's true. There's a discussion to be had whether or not slides or PowerPoint, which one is best for what settings for our students, for teaching, etc. There's a great discussion to be had. But to suddenly post that and have always been this kind of Google guru person and presenting and blah, 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 and all of a sudden you just make a switch, but you didn't say why you did that. And it was obvious to some of us on the instant where we're like, oh, something must be happening here. Some money must be exchanging hands. Some opportunities must be presenting themselves, which is great. Fantastic for you.
Yeah.
But state that. I've decided to join Microsoft's team because they're innovative. They're fantastic. Talk about the reasons why. Sure.
Don't have a problem with the sponsorship.
No, that's what we do.
Hey, friends, go to participate.com and then right away go to GoGuardian. Please do that. Thank you.
But we're out front with it, and we say these are the people that are supporting and sponsoring financially the podcast itself.
Yeah.
And just to put it out there, though, too, Mike, just so people know, and I know we've said this probably on other episodes, back in the past, but people that are joining us, our sponsorships, everybody, go directly into the production of this podcast. So whether it be these microphones,
trips,
or it be the actual us being able to go to the ISTE, that's super expensive to go to, and then be able to attend so that we can get those interviews, to get that content to you so that you are there in a way, through us, you're able to go ahead and experience it through the interviews that we have. And that's always been our mission. Since we were first talking, we're like, if we can get a sponsorship, we can buy the computer. Remember, we started with a computer. We just needed something to be able to handle this process of what we were going to start. And then some, you had a super, super cheap microphone to start off with. I don't know if the first few episodes.
Snowball.
Yeah. And I had my Blue Yeti that was just mine for a long time. And we just, little piece by little piece, we bought little pieces of different things. And then we had some more money, and we're like, okay, let's buy this piece of equipment that we can take on the road. Let's buy these headsets. Let's buy this microphone. Let's do these things just to make it sound better and to make it more professional. And also then to be able to take us to those places that we would have never been able to go to otherwise, which we thank our sponsors for that. But we're upfront with all that stuff.
There's a sponsorship page on our website. You go to OnEducation.com and go to its sponsorships. You can not only see our current sponsors, but you can see our past sponsors as well. We have no, like, in my tweet, like, no secrets, like, and I actually wrote a follow-up kind of post on Facebook that said that not only, because I firmly believe that you can say all the nonsense in the world that you want, follow things up with action. We've been talking about this a lot. We talked about this related to George Floyd. We made a statement on the podcast, on the website. You can go read that too. But it actually had things that we were going to do about it. And so, with this, I did the exact same thing. I said, not only am I like putting my money where my mouth is and telling you everything that I've ever done for money, generally speaking, in education as a quote unquote influencer or whatever the hell you want to call us. But I also, in my About Me page on my personal website, I wrote basically a disclaimer at the bottom that explains, who I've worked for and who I've done, like that. I've worked for Epic Games. They paid me money to do some stuff for Fortnite. OnEducation sponsors are Participate and Go Guardian. I work for Participate, and I used to work for Logix Academy. Yes. I get paid to do the Logix Academy podcast. I mean, that's it, friends. And if you're listening and you get paid by an ed tech company and you don't have the balls to basically straight up, just say where your relationships are, then first off, you're breaking the law because there are laws related to this. And second, take a look around for your integrity a little bit, please, because it's funny. I could go on about this and on, but I will. There's a really good story here. Yeah, I used to travel with Logix and do professional development all over Canada, and constantly got asked how much things cost, and I had no clue how much things cost. I intentionally did not look at price lists. Rami, my boss, the CEO of Logix, hated it because I couldn't tell anyone how much a dash cost. I don't know how much the damn robot costs. I'm sorry. But here's the way I framed it, and this is the truth. This is the reason why. It was intentional. It was because when I'm telling an educator, when I'm giving an educator advice and I'm telling them about a product that I think that they should use, I didn't want them to think that I was trying to sell them that product. Yeah. So I didn't know how much things cost. I was like, you're going to have to talk to Keith. Keith is the sales guy. You go talk to Keith. Keith will tell you how much the Dash costs. I'm telling you that Dash might be the solution to your problem that you have related to educational robotics. I'm not trying to sell you it. I'm telling you as an educator that's used this in the classroom. I think that's what integrity looks like. I think I was trying to be the educator advisor in the room, not a salesperson. And I think that there's a huge difference. I think you can be both. I think you can, like we do. Again, please go to participate.com. We can do that, right? Yeah. But just don't lie about it. Yeah. Just be honest. Be real about it. I assume if you're partnering with a company, you believe in what they do and how they do it and why they do it. And I'm cool with that. I like a lot of Microsoft products. I think Teams is garbage, but I think I like a lot of other
shots
Microsoft.
Fired out there.
Yeah. I'm on fire today. Obviously Minecraft is, we love it. Minecraft is the single best tool for teaching and learning that exists. I also say that. So I'm saying Teams is garbage and Minecraft is amazing. But you know what? At least I'm honest about, where things come from and where they're going. And we are here on the podcast too. And all we're asking is that everyone who's listening does the same.
Absolutely. perfect transition to whether or not these
segue.
Yes, this is our segue. whether or not pushing to open the schools, which already has happened, by the way, is guaranteed to fail, as it says in the Atlantic, the article that was written, I think, yesterday. Yeah, it was written August 2nd. And just a few days ago in Georgia, where they had to opened up some schools, and they immediately shut those same schools down, Mike, where that
didn't take long.
Yeah. And is it not a surprise that happened?
No, probably
not. Okay. But I think it is surprising some people. I think it's finally waking up some people, as far as especially people who were maybe not believing in everything, or maybe just didn't, really say.
You're saying those words really nicely.
These things might be just going away, whatever it might be. And and what I am envisioning, though, as this article basically states, is that how bad can this really get as far as this opening and closing of all of these schools that are going to happen? Because some big states like Florida, I believe, has stated that they will open face to face, and some other states have declared that also. And what's going to happen basically in these next few weeks, and that's why I was talking about at the top of the show, is saying I think that each week we're going to hear more and more devastating stories as people open up, and I think we're hopefully being able to go ahead and learn from those things. As our date for opening is after Labor Day, thank God Labor Day is so far out for us this year. I think we don't even start back till September 8th or 9th or something like that.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I think that is actually a good thing, as we start seeing kind of all of these other people experiment, unfortunately, with their children, and then go, maybe this wasn't that good of an idea. And I don't want to be a pessimist about it, because I know a lot of people are putting different safeguards in there. As we talked about masks, there's all these different types of protocols that some states are taking, but I don't know if it's going to be enough. When you have that many people in one place, it's the thing that has been said since the beginning. It is the virus spreaders, the way that this actually can go ahead and be pushed from one person to another, and then big groups, and it basically, how bad can it actually get? I think we're going to find out in the next few months, and that's crazy. And I think each week we're going to be reporting kind of like what's the next articles. We have a list, honestly, everybody, we have a list of articles already in the first few days of people opening their schools, and already we have all of these crazy, sad stories of governors basically saying, no, you will open schools, and then the superintendents having to try to do their best as far as to keep everyone safe. And we all know that may not be possible with the constraints that we have, the space constraints, and all the types of things, that not enough PPE, etc. So
there are places
times.
Just like the solutions and how different they are from each other. There are places that will probably be just fine.
Yes.
Where it'll be complicated.
Exactly.
It will be exhausting. It'll be frustrating, but you'll get by. It'll be fine. It'll be what it is. It'll be the hardest teaching year of your life. It'll be a great story to tell 10 years from now, maybe, I don't know, about resilience and the fact that teachers have to endure so much stuff and become that year that you had to become a nurse as well, in addition to all the other jobs that you did.
Yeah.
But
with biohazard equipment too.
Right.
I mean, if you think about the equipment that we're going to be wearing to protect ourselves, basically we're protecting ourselves from biohazards. It's like, wow. That's a new level of teaching commitment.
And administering, in Ontario, the public health official, the head public health official in Ontario, said super casually, like off the freaking cuff, and it's like, did you just say what I think you said? She said, teachers will administer coronavirus tests. and like the internet exploded. It was like, did you just say that teachers are going to give students coronavirus tests? Like,
No.
how many lawsuits do you want? I mean, seriously, it was just the craziest thing I'd ever heard. Just totally, like, it was off the cuff, and it was like, she better walk that one back a little bit because, hey, newsflash, teachers aren't nurses.
No, and we're not law enforcement either, people. You know, I'm just thinking all the things that people have decided that we can do. We can carry guns to go ahead and protect our schools. We can give tests, biomedical tests. Imagine that. So you're like the training that all of our amazing nurses and doctors and medical professionals around the world, and how much medical training you have to do that correctly and to make sure that you're safe as well as your patients, and saying that some teachers are going to be able to oh God, it's just
Isn't that
insane.
something?
It's crazy.
Isn't that something?
Yes.
So there are places that'll do this just fine. There are places that will be absolute nightmares. And
Yes.
again, I said it last week. I'm going to say it this week. There will be students and teachers who will die.
I know. And that's going to be horrible. I mean, like I said, we don't want to be pessimists about it or being like, I don't think we're being
Realist.
overly dramatic at all.
Be
either.
realist.
Yeah. I mean, it's real and it's here. And each week we're going to report what the next,
Listen, friends,
was.
if you were listening to us for Rainbows and Sunshine, I don't know where the hell you got that idea from. I mean,
we're going to have a Rainbows and Sunshine segment, Mike, because it's going to be, how that local or the news segments, I don't know if they do the same thing in Canada, but they give you, it's a 30-minute newscast. They give you 29 and a half minutes of devastating, horrible
bad news, and then squirrels on boats for 30 seconds.
In the last 30 seconds is this nice, beautiful story
memes.
of someone that did something beautiful and amazing for other people, an amazing lifting up story, just so that you don't go, God,
we're going to need to recruit someone on our team to find like a
we need a great story.
Toxic positivity story.
Yeah, we need a positive story at the end of each at the end of this segment each week as we start delivering what doesn't look good. I mean, doesn't look good, and it's going to be this whole year. It's not going to be, we're going to be talking about this through basically through this entire school year, the 2021 school year.
We'll bring you stories of how teachers have kicked ass working through this. I promise you that, because that's the one thing that we know is going to happen in some of these places. We'll be telling you those stories because those are the stories that deserve to get told as much as all of these hard things that we're saying are, and talking about, we still have tons of friends. We have tons of conversations to have about, race and diversity and equity in this country, in this continent. And, those aren't going away. And, we made promises to talk more about those things. And, those conversations are coming and are still happening. So just because we're talking about the coronavirus this week doesn't mean we're not still making plans to keep those conversations happening too. But we will make a point also to tell you about the teachers that are overcoming these incredible hurdles and obstacles, just, and put in, crazy situations just so they can teach kids. Because I think you deserve that
for sure
story as well. So let's I'm not going to say let's stay positive. Let's just stay real. Let's just keep having those conversations. There are a ton of articles. They're all relatively about the same thing, about how scary it is to everything that's happening, stories from all over the place. We'll put a bunch of those in the show notes for you to read, because they are pretty interesting. We had a really great talk with our next guest. He's the CEO of Ready Learner One, Micah Shippee. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Our guest this week is an author and educator. He's the CEO of Ready Learner One. And if you were looking to talk to someone about what's next in education, he'd probably be one of your guys. Welcome to OnEducation, Micah Shippee.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. I love your podcast, and I'm really excited for our conversation tonight.
Thanks, man. Awesome. Micah, for anyone who doesn't know who you are and kind of your work, why don't you just introduce yourself to the audience and kind of give us a bit of the Micah 101, what led you to us today?
Sure. How much time do I have?
30 seconds. No,
30 seconds. All right. So
you're good.
I've been teaching grade 8 social studies, middle school teacher for 20 years, just finished number 20. Left my students on March 16th for quarantine. We all were quarantined, of course, talking about countries banding together on the home front for World War II, and we drew some comparisons about factories in the United States and the present-day world banding together to support hospitals with respirators and masks. And then I concluded my year speaking with my students, again, remotely, about the civil rights movement. So this has been a memorial of a year. I mean, I don't know. I think this one's going to go down in the books for my kids and I. So it's been a challenge, of course. I have coached soccer for a million years, so I was pretty excited to see Glen's About Me page with a Manchester United jersey on. So instantly, we are the best of friends. Coached soccer for many years. I have a PhD in instructional design, development, and evaluation. I have a very patient wife and 3 beautiful kids and a dog and a cat. Love what I do, and the latest is Ready Learner One. Love Ready Learner One, and this company of like-minded folks coming together to learn how to serve others in the training and learning space through the most emergent tools that can be meaningfully employed by both corporate and educational institutions, looking to bridge gaps that we weren't ready for.
So let's talk about Ready Learner One for a quick second. Tell us what brings you from being a social studies teacher to wanting to start a company that is related. I mean, we're actually a little bit similar in that I have a history major as well, and am like social studies nerd and use Minecraft to teach social studies, right? But I mean, I'd love to hear your story about your path where you go from being a social studies teacher to talking about emerging technologies in the corporate world as well, not just in education. What brought those two pieces together, and take a deep dive into a little bit of the work that you've been doing with Ready Learner One.
So, that's really good. I didn't know about your history degree. Cool.
Yeah.
It's all about the power of story. So, as a kid, my grandparents would tell me historical anecdotes related to my family and our community, and those stories resonated, and I learned the power of the story through them. Gained a love for history, studied history, did a study abroad in London, and really got roped into the power of story and how I could deliver story. As a young teacher, my go-to was me delivering a story, which I still think storytelling is very powerful for an educator, don't get me wrong. But what I came to learn is that it was important for my students to have experiential knowledge that would lead to their story. So I started to dive into things like Oregon Trail, the old 1984 MECC game, putting my students on it and watching them get excited about it. And the gameplay in the classroom, simulation in the classroom, and how my role as a storyteller kind of shifted to role as a guide, and where we would make meaning about these experiences together. And of course, to do that in the classroom, I had to stretch boundaries. Schools have safety procedures and protocols in place that prevent access to certain tools and devices. They can't always support them. I have mixed feelings on that. I'm a bit of a romantic where I just want the kids to have the toys to play with, because they're not toys, they're learning tools, right? So my efforts to provide more access in my classroom led to an interest in a field of study called instructional technology. I started down the road of educational administration, and at the time, I was young and it wasn't for me, honestly. So I shifted my course of study and my postgraduate work to, again, instructional design. So an instructional designer can be described as someone who is not a subject matter expert. They go to a subject matter expert and they talk to the subject matter expert about content. They go to the learner and they talk to the learner about what they need, and the instructional designer bridges that gap. So I had found myself doing that in my classroom. I had found myself excited to help my colleagues do that when the opportunity came up. And speed forward in time, after my graduate study, I moved on to my PhD study. And there I was working with a non-for-profit that wanted to deliver mobile learning content to people in East Africa who did not have electricity. So they're off the electrical grid. They're charging their phones with solar power. They can go about a mile to receive cellular access to download content and then take that back to their home. And so that way of providing access of content to people through emergent technology just plain snowballed. Started with kids in my classroom and just went down through again from pretty nerdy research that I got myself into. Go ahead.
It's funny that you brought up something I was going to actually ask you about anyway. So I always love when people do that. About, and I had this struggle a little bit too, teaching and wanting to do like crazy stuff in your classroom, like really pushing the boundaries of what most administrators will let you get away with. I mean, I talk a lot in a lot of the things, in a lot of the places I speak about innovation and not being afraid to innovate and stuff like that. But, schools and administrations and districts are notorious for putting guardrails on educators. Don't go too far, don't do too much. You never know, where your, limitations are until you're psyched up about something and then you can't do it because they just say they put the kibosh on it or whatever. Talk a little bit about walking that fine line between, how you were able to do like really innovative things in your class, while also, being allowed to do really innovative things in your class.
Yeah, I've been blessed to have administrators that have given me a little bit of space, not carte blanche, but a little bit of space. And I'm a firm believer that when we move forward to adopt change, and classic change management strategies, everything starts with relationships. The relationships that we have with each other, the trust that comes from the relationships, everything from interdisciplinary teaching strategies with colleagues to trying new stuff out in the classroom starts with people trusting that you have the children's or your learners' best interest in mind. And once you have that trust, you show a taste for what you want to do, and then you head down the path where you end up having a LAN party with your kids in 20 Macs connected on Civilization 4 colonization. It ended up being pretty cool. But it started from a place of trust and a reputation for, if it doesn't work, I'm going to try something new. If it doesn't work, don't worry. I'm still going to take care of the objectives and important learning content for my students.
So, Micah, has COVID changed? And I mean, it's an obvious answer, but maybe you can expand upon it. Has COVID changed anything in terms of your work? We're thinking that there's a huge interest in virtual learning environments, both in education, and you obviously serve also to corporate world. What has changed since March for you?
Well, I think there's some interesting articles coming out. I wouldn't call it research. Articles talking about how people can be incredibly productive at home, how there's going to be a mass exodus from major cities like New York City and San Francisco to the countryside because people can learn from home. I saw one today from the Wall Street Journal, said everybody's rethinking that. Maybe it's not as productive. But you know what, from an educator side, working with my grade 8 students, what I found is that, yes, they need that face-to-face time. But I also found they were able to do things on their own that when in the room with me, I was too much of a crutch. So if they got stuck, they would raise their hand and ask for help. Yet at home, they're not asking for that help, and they are producers of some really high quality content. So there's an interesting shift about letting go a little bit and letting the students troubleshoot themselves some, balanced by guiding them when it gets really sticky for them.
It's that thing, Micah, that I was just thinking about when, probably you experienced this 12, 13, 14 years ago when the flipped classroom was all the rage. And many of us flipped our videos and we did different things. And we were excited about it, but then we weren't getting the same kind of results because we were still there. It felt like I was still there. So they were like, why am I going to go to the video or start trying to think through myself? This is what I have you need to be teaching me. And then there was this kind of controversial, like felt very controversial for both with the students and parents. You know what I'm talking about?
I've been really, really reflecting on the flipped classroom model a lot. If you asked me about it 5 years ago, I had a real bad taste in my mouth because all I had honestly seen was more work for kids, period. I had seen kids get out of school, go home, and then do double the amount of work. Yes. That's what I had seen. It doesn't mean that's what the flipped classroom is meant to be. It's just what I had seen. But now, like my school, currently in September when we go back, we're supposed to be in a hybrid model where my students will be with me one day, half of my students, then they'll be home, and the other half will be with me, and then they'll be home. So now if you take that strategy of the flipped classroom for when they're at home, that makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me is kids working overtime.
Yeah, especially right now, right? I mean, it's hard enough as it is, and with parents, trying to juggle, working from home or, having their kids at home or not at home. And some days they are, and some days they aren't in some cases. And then in other places, the uncertainty of whether, the schools are going to have to shut down. These kind of like, I think these hybrid learning models of virtual worlds and virtual spaces are going to really take off. I think you were actually, it's funny. It made me thought we were in a meeting together a couple weeks ago, and you told me about a space, and I can't remember the name of it, but I'm hoping you remember what we were talking about. A meeting space that happened in VR that you could like have actual meetings with like a whiteboard and stuff. And I think stuff like that is like mind blowing. And I'd love to talk. What was that we were talking about?
Well, it could have been one of two things. I know you and Steve Isaacs were looking at Mozilla Hubs. I think you looked at one together right on Twitch.
Yeah.
Love Mozilla Hubs. Their latest update, by the way, is for location-based sound. So as your avatar moves away, the volume goes down, which is really awesome. Good. I tried it out with my students, and they would spread out this huge crater and look at some different activities that I had set up, and when they would talk, it would all be the same level. So it wasn't very good, but that update's big. What you're probably thinking of is Spatial. Spatial.io, which they offered for free during part of the COVID quarantine. I'm not sure if it still is. Allows users to enter through a laptop, to enter through a VR headset, or to enter through augmented reality using a tool like the HoloLens. And in that case, they're all present in the same space, which is all virtual. It's a fantastic tool. The concept is amazing. The issue we have in education is, we have student privacy and data privacy protocols in place that are really important for keeping our students safe and protecting their data, but they're not always a priority. So, talking with Spatial, they're very interested in higher ed and corporate, but K-12 is not really high up on the priorities right now. Then you look at something like Mozilla Hubs, and you can enter anonymously through a web link. You can add a name if you want to. There's no data being collected. So is one of them perfect? Absolutely not. But the fact that those places exist and I can bring in three-dimensional assets and students can explore and whiteboard and have conversation with a better sense of presence than a Zoom meeting, I think there's some power there.
So speaking of Steve Isaacs, who actually has a little poster on his wall for the times that he gets mentioned in OnEducation. So Steve, you can check your name off on your little checklist for every time your name gets dropped on the podcast. We should talk a bit about esports. I think all three of us here agree that esports is part of the future. And not just the future of entertainment, it's already there in terms of entertainment, but also I think how we teach and learn. And as someone who thinks a lot about the future of education and technology, what do you think the future holds for teaching and learning with esports?
My colleagues, Christine Lyon-Bailey at Ready Learner One, as well as Steve Isaacs, he can make another hash mark, and Chris Aviles, they are co-authoring a book about esports, and there's a lot of power in that. And one of the things that Christine was telling me was that esports really is the athletics of quarantine. It's the athletics of COVID-19, and I really like that. And I had, I've done some futurist talks about education and trying to help people think ahead about where we're going in education. And one of the things that really stuck out to me is how being a member of a team should be part of the educational experience. Years ago, I ran a ski school. I used to teach downhill skiing, and then I actually ran a ski school. My employees were high school and college students. And I'll tell you flat out, the best employees were athletes on a team sport. So now looking at team sport play through esports, we're now opening access to more students who can't make the football team or the soccer team, but they have a skill set that's very valuable in the esports arena. And they have the opportunity to work together to learn collaboration, critical thinking, creativity with each other in the moment, in such a heightened moment that esports brings out. So I think esports is a necessary next step in the evolution of the educational experience of our students, because education is about preparing students for their future, and their future, not my past. My past of sitting in rows and preparing for post-industrial revolution thinking. We're past post-industrial revolution. One author calls it the fourth industrial revolution. We're at a whole new phase, and that whole new phase, it's going to take collaboration. And in the case of the pandemic and being distanced, we've been saying for years that the future of work is going to be gig-based. We've been saying for years it's going to be remote. Well, now we're all forced to actually work this way. We're forced into this environment and into change, which we didn't really want. It's disruption, and not all disruption is desirable. In fact, most of the time we don't want it. But now it's forced upon us, and we have to reflect in a manner that can positively inform future steps for education.
It's funny that we use the term, 21st century learning and all of that stuff all the time. And I'll tell you, esports is one of the only true, in my mind, like 21st century learning opportunities where it is absolutely like the future. Like, it's not here yet, but we're starting to build on it, and it's emerging as we speak. And we still haven't figured it all out yet, but we have our top people on it. And
sure.
we're super happy that book is coming out. I was, I got asked to contribute to it, and I'm psyched about that too. So like I said, our top people are working on it, and I think it's absolutely going to be a pretty amazing thing. Micah, if people want to learn more about you, learn more about Ready Learner 1, learn more about all the amazing things you guys are doing and how to connect with you, how do they go and do that?
So our website is readylearner.one. And when you go to readylearner.one, you'll see our two company channels. You'll see a link for K-12 and higher ed, and you'll see a link for the corporate spaces. So in both of those worlds, our language is adjusted to meet the target audience. We're providing schools with professional development through face-to-face and remote opportunities. We provide the gamut of professional development opportunities for schools. We've been working with the Madison Institute. Together, we launched the Changemaker Conference in July, which we had 2,000 registrants from over 30 different countries around the world. So it's a really cool opportunity that we're providing. We're finding a new opportunity to serve our educators, colleagues, as well as to open up some really great skills from the education world and provide them for the corporate space. So it's readylearner.one, and you can email me at micah@readylearner.one or Micah Shippee on Twitter.
Micah Shippee, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. This is great.
Thanks for listening to OnEducation. My name is Glen Irvin. My co-host is Mike Washburn. OnEducation is part of the On Podcast Media Network. You can listen to this show and many others by great educators like Monica Burns, Mike Matera, Tisha Richmond, and many more by visiting onpodcastmedia.com. Want to get in touch with us? Check out our website, oneducationpodcast.com. You can tweet us at OnEducationPod. Mike is at Mr. Washburn on Twitter, and I can be found on Twitter at IrvSpanish. You can find us on Facebook by visiting facebook.com/OnEducationPod. We're also on Instagram at OnEducationPod. If you're enjoying the show and think others would too, we would be thrilled if you shared it with them. please leave us a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. When you leave a rating, it gives our rankings a boost. This helps others discover the show. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Participate, for supporting us. Check out participate.com to learn more about them. Thanks as always for listening, stay awesome, and see you soon.